Hi there. We're going to talk about PPP today. How can you spend the money from your PPP loan? And ideally, how can you get it forgiven? I'm Jerry Detweiler, Education Director for NAV.
And I'm Ty Kiesel, and from NAV. I'm responsible for the content here.
So let's talk about how you're going to spend your PPP funds. Now, keep in mind, we are not attorneys and we're not accountants. So we're providing this as educational information so you can go back to your advisors and ask them questions so you can spend this money properly. We're also doing this quickly as an overview. So if you have individual questions, you want to dive into more details, which you can do so at the NAV blog.
The PPP stands for the Paycheck Protection Program. The main purpose of the program is to keep employees on payroll. That means the main expense that you're going to pay in order to get forgiveness needs to be payroll. In fact, if you want to get your loan fully forgiven, you'll need to spend at least 60% of your PPP funds on payroll.
That's right. And if you're self-employed or an independent contractor or a gig worker, you may not pay yourself formal payroll, but you can use that money to pay yourself, and that can count as payroll. In fact, you may qualify 100% based on the money you pay yourself in your business, and that's your net profit on your Schedule C.
Payroll for your employees can include money that is part of your annual compensation up to $100,000. And you may also be able to include benefits like their life insurance, health, vision, dental, or any of those, or disability, any of those type of things that you're paying for.
Now, if you reduce headcount or wages, if you have employees, headcount, wages, hours, etc., that could reduce your forgiveness. Won't necessarily eliminate it, but it could reduce it. Now, there are some exceptions for businesses that may have had employees who don't want to come back to work or who may have been closed due to government shutdown orders. So if you have employees and you know your payroll is not going to stay at the same level during the time that you spend this money, I would highly recommend in advance you read the guidance so you understand how this works and see what those offsetting circumstances might be.
And in addition to your payroll, you can spend up to 40% of your PPP funds on rent, utilities, mortgage interest. And because of the coronavirus pandemic, a new category of covered expenses could include things like the PPP, or excuse me, the PPE, or the personal protective equipment that you have to purchase, like masks and things like that.
Yeah, we've got a lot of those acronyms floating around. For a full list of those covered expenses, you can go to our article at nav.com/PPP. Just put in lowercase PPP and you'll go straight to that article. They're all spelled out there. And if you are self-employed, I want you to remember that if you're not going to qualify 100% based on the money you pay yourself, then for those other expenses like rent or utilities, they need to be business expenses. In other words, just because you're working from home right now full time for the pandemic, that doesn't mean you can write off 100% of your rent for the place that you live in. So they have to be business expenses that you would normally deduct on your tax return.
And you'll also need to keep in mind that the time period you have to spend the funds, and that's called the covered period, and it starts once the loan is dispersed to your bank account.
Yeah, that's when the money hits your bank account. That's when the clock starts ticking. So that's why it's so important to understand how to properly spend your PPP money before you get that loan in your bank account. Now, originally the covered period was 8 weeks after you got the loan. That's how much you had. And then we had the PPP Flexibility Act in June of 2020 that gave you 8 or 24 weeks. Now with the stimulus bill, you have 8 to 24 weeks, and you can choose the period. And that applies to any PPP loan that has not yet been forgiven. So it does give you more flexibility. What it doesn't do is it doesn't let you postpone and say, well, I want to wait till a month after I get my PPP money to start spending it for these expenses. It starts when that loan is dispersed into your bank account.
And the probably the biggest piece of advice that we can give you today is make sure you keep careful track of how you spend your PPP funds. There are some advisors who are even suggesting a separate checking account, but you may be audited by the SBA to make sure you spend the funds properly, and a separate bank account will help you keep track of how you spend your PPP funds, and frankly is just a good idea.
We hope you found this overview of how you can spend your PPP funds helpful. And again, for more information, go to nav.com/PPP and you'll see a complete breakdown of how this works based on the latest guidance. Good luck to your business.